the line she expected him to cross. She arranged the room before she arranged herself. The lamp was left on low, not dim enough to hide details, not bright enough to feel honest. The curtain stayed half open, letting the city glow leak in like a quiet witness. The bed was untouched. That mattered. It suggested choice, not invitation. She stood near the window for a moment, watching reflections move across the glass, then turned when she heard his steps outside the door. She didn't sit. Sitting looked like waiting. She preferred standing. Standing looked like control. When he entered, she didn't greet him. No smile, no apology for the silence. She let the door close behind him and listened to the sound settle. It was a soft sound, careful, like he didn't want to disturb the moment more than necessary. He stopped a few feet away. That distance was intentional. She had measured it earlier. Close enough to feel presence, far enough to feel restraint. "You can take your jacket off," she said. He didn't. "I'm fine," he replied. The first crack appeared there, small but noticeable. Most people rushed to get comfortable. They wanted the room to accept them. He stayed exactly as he was, like comfort was optional. She moved first, not toward him, to the bed. She sat on the edge, slow enough to be seen, casual enough to look unplanned. Her hands rested at her sides, palms flat, shoulders relaxed. She didn't cross her legs. Crossing looked defensive. She wanted open without offering. He watched. She felt it in the way the air tightened, in the quiet shift that made her skin aware of itself. This was the moment she understood well, the moment when eyes lingered, when breath changed, when someone leaned forward just a little too much. She waited. He didn't move. "You're quiet," she said. "I'm listening," he replied. That was not the same thing. She smiled faintly, dark humor brushing the edge of it. People often mistook listening for patience. Patience always ran out. She leaned back on her hands, arching just enough to change the line of her body. Not a performance, an adjustment. She let the movement speak for her. The room noticed. He didn't step closer. She felt a flicker of irritation, unexpected and sharp. It surprised her. Irritation usually came later, after someone crossed the line badly. Too fast, too rough, too eager. This was different. "You know why I invited you?" she said. "Yes," he replied. "And you're not nervous." "No." "And you're not in a hurry." "No." Each answer landed without decoration. No softening, no tension release. She stood, closing the distance by half without touching him. The air between them warmed, not from bodies, but from awareness. She could feel his presence clearly now. The steadiness of it, the refusal to fill space just because it existed. "You're very disciplined," she said. "Yes," he replied. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. Discipline usually hid something. Fear, control, desire pretending to be virtue. She wanted to see which one it was. "You don't worry about crossing lines," she said. "I worry about erasing them," he replied. The words landed heavier than she expected. She laughed softly, not because it was funny, but because it disrupted her rhythm. "That sounds like something people say after they've already crossed them." He met her eyes fully then. "I don't cross what isn't offered," he said, "and I don't take what's implied." The tension sharpened, thin and precise. She felt it travel up her spine, not as heat, but as a tension. This wasn't desire being pulled forward. This was desire being held back. She took another step closer. Close enough now to feel heat. Close enough to test him. He stayed still. That was the moment something shifted. She had drawn the line, expecting him to lean over it, to step across with a look that asked forgiveness later, to use the silence as permission. He did none of it. "You could," she said quietly. "No one would stop you." "That's exactly why I won't," he replied. The dark humor of it struck her all at once, sharp and unwelcome. She had built this moment carefully, like she always did, controlled the light, the space, the pace, and he had stepped into it without stepping where she expected. "You're enjoying this?" she said. "Yes," he replied. "Just not the way you planned." She felt a low, unfamiliar tension settle beneath her ribs. Not excitement, not frustration, uncertainty. She stepped back, then sat again, this time crossing one leg slowly, deliberately, letting the movement breathe. She watched his eyes, measured the delay, the restraint. He noticed. He just didn't react. Silence filled the room, not empty, not awkward, charged, dense, the kind that asked questions without words. She realized then that waiting had become work. Usually the waiting ended quickly. Someone crossed the line. Someone made the first move. Control shifted, even if just for a moment. This time, the waiting stretched. "You're not going to do anything," she said. "I already am," he replied. She frowned, standing there. "No," he said, not crossing. The line she had drawn suddenly felt very real beneath her feet. She stood again, slower this time, testing the space with intention rather than confidence. She circled him without touching, letting the air carry suggestion instead of skin. He turned with her, keeping the distance intact. "You're patient," she said. "Yes." "And you're stubborn." "Yes." She stopped directly in front of him, close, close enough to hear his breathing, close enough to notice it hadn't changed. Her pulse had. She felt the tension settle into something darker now. Not playful, not light. This wasn't a game she was winning or losing. This was a game that had stopped following her rules. She looked up at him, searching for the crack, the hunger, the moment where restraint would give way. It didn't come. That was the seduction. She stepped back, suddenly aware of her own breath, her own body, her own expectations sitting exposed in the low light. "You're waiting," she said. "Yes," he replied. "For what?" "For you to notice," he said. The room felt smaller then. Not claustrophobic, focused. She did notice. She noticed that the line had not been crossed because it had not been taken seriously until now. She noticed that restraint, when chosen, carried more weight than desire ever had. She laughed again, quieter this time. "I waited for you," she said. He nodded once. "And now," he said, "you're the one standing on the edge." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The line remained unbroken. That was the most dangerous part of all. The silence did not break. It thickened. She felt it press against her ears, her chest, the space between her thoughts. Silence like this wasn't absence. It was presence, refusing to speak first. She had learned long ago that silence usually meant advantage. Someone would fill it. Someone always did. She had built her life on that certainty. She shifted her weight, slow and deliberate, letting the movement exist without explaining itself. The floor was cool beneath her feet. The room held steady, light unchanged, air patient. He stayed where he was, still, attentive, unmoved. The tension sharpened, no longer playful, no longer theoretical. It had a shape now, a direction, and it wasn't pointing where she expected. "You're making this difficult?" she said. "Yes," he replied. No apology, no pleasure taken in it, just truth, delivered evenly. She exhaled through her nose, a small sound that betrayed her irritation. Usually, difficulty came from resistance wrapped in desire. This felt different. This felt intentional. "You could leave," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "You could step closer." "Yes." "You could do nothing, yes." The repetition unsettled her. It removed the hierarchy she was used to. Options existed without preference being declared. Control wasn't being asserted, it was being withheld. She turned away from him, walking toward the window, letting the city glow touch her face. Reflections slid across the glass, doubling her image, splitting it into versions she barely recognized. She watched herself watching. Most people would have closed the distance by now. They would have taken the quiet as invitation, the closeness as permission. They would have crossed the line just to see what would happen. He had not. That was the point. "You're enjoying this," she said again, softer now. Less accusation, more observation. "Yes," he replied, "but not the way I intended." "No," he said. "I'm enjoying the restraint." The word landed low, slow, heavy. Restraint was not a word people used honestly. They used it to pretend they were better than their impulses. They used it to dress up fear as discipline. This felt neither. She turned back to him. "How long can you stand there?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. "As long as it stays interesting," he said. Her pulse picked up, not racing, but tightening, like something winding carefully. She stepped toward him again, not rushing, not circling this time. Straight, direct, close enough now that the air between them felt warmer, charged by proximity alone. She could smell him faintly, clean and neutral, nothing aggressive or indulgent. He didn't lean in, he didn't lean away. That steadiness was infuriating. "You're very sure of yourself," she said. "No," he replied. "I'm very sure of my boundaries." The distinction stung. Boundaries were usually something she offered others to cross, something she relaxed strategically, something she redrew after the fact. She hadn't expected to meet one that didn't move. She lifted her hand slowly, stopping inches from his chest, not touching, just existing there. The moment stretched, taut as a held breath. Her fingers hovered, waiting for him to flinch, to react, to take over. He didn't. "You could stop me," she said quietly. "Yes, but you won't." "No," he said, "because you're testing something." Her hand remained suspended. Her arm began to ache slightly from the effort of holding still. The physical sensation grounded her, made the moment real in a way she hadn't anticipated. "And what am I testing?" she said. "Whether control disappears if no one grabs it," he replied. The answer struck deeper than she wanted to admit. She lowered her hand slowly and stepped back, breaking the closeness herself. The tension did not dissolve. It redistributed, settling into the room like a charged atmosphere after lightning. She laughed once, sharp and dry. "This isn't how this usually goes," she said. "I know," he replied. "People cross lines," she continued. "That's how you learn where they are." "Or," he said, "it's how you avoid learning anything at all." She stared at him, searching again for the crack, the impatience, the hunger, something she could push against. She found none. "You're not afraid?" she said. "Oh, no." "You're not tempted?" "Yes." The admission surprised her. She raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" "Because temptation doesn't require action," he said. "It requires awareness." The erotic tension shifted again. Darker now, less playful, more intimate. This wasn't about bodies. This was about attention being focused and refused at the same time. She felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with skin. She moved back to the bed and sat, this time without choreography. No slow movement, no deliberate angle, just sitting, grounding herself. He remained standing. That imbalance mattered. "You're used to people leaning in," he said. "Yes," she replied. "You're used to being the moment they lose discipline." "Yes." "And tonight," he continued, "you're waiting for me to do that." She didn't answer. Because it was true. She had waited, confident, amused, certain that time would erode restraint the way it always did. She had believed patience was a weakness that pretended to be virtue. Now patience was the weapon. "You could cross it yourself," he said. She looked up sharply. "That wouldn't be the same." "No," he agreed. "It would be honest." The room felt suddenly smaller, like the walls had leaned in slightly to listen. Her breath sounded louder in her ears. She became acutely aware of her own posture, her own stillness, her own waiting. She had never been the one waiting before. Not like this. She stood again, slower, less certain. The confidence she had carried at the start now sharpened into something more fragile, more precise. "This isn't fair," she said. He smiled faintly. "Neither is expectation," he replied. She stopped a few steps away from him, no longer circling, no longer performing, just standing. The line remained where she had drawn it, uncrossed, untouched, heavy with meaning. She realized then that the waiting had stopped being about him crossing it. It was about whether she would. The thought unsettled her, dark and electric. She met his eyes, held them, felt the tension hum between them like a live wire. Not desire reaching forward, desire being held back on purpose. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. "You're not going to move," she said. "No. And you're not going to leave. Not yet." She nodded slowly, understanding settling in piece by piece. The waiting had become loud because it was no longer empty. It was full of choice. And for the first time that night, she wasn't sure which side of the line she wanted to be on. The silence returned, not as absence, but as pressure. It held, exactly where it was. The room felt different once she understood the waiting was no longer about him. That realization landed quietly, but it rearranged everything. The air didn't thicken. The light didn't change. What shifted was her attention. It folded inward, turning from performance to awareness, from control to consequence. She stayed where she was, a few steps away, letting the distance exist without filling it. The old instinct tugged at her, the familiar urge to escalate, to provoke a response that would restore the shape she knew. She resisted it, not because she was calm, but because she was curious. Curiosity was new. He watched her without moving, without the tension of anticipation she'd come to expect from men who waited. This was different. This was stillness with edges, a patience that didn't feel like delay, but like a decision being honored in real time. She exhaled slowly, letting the sound be heard. "So this is it," she said. "We stand here." "Yes," he replied, "and nothing happens." "No," he said, "things are happening." She smiled, small and sharp. "You're very confident." "No," he said, "I'm very present." The words settled into her, warm and unsettling. Presence had always been something she offered, a gift, a lure. She had never considered it something that could be withheld with such precision. She walked toward the chair near the wall and sat, not carefully, not dramatically. The movement broke the symmetry. He remained standing. The imbalance shifted again, subtle but undeniable. She felt it in her body first. A heat that wasn't about touch. A focus that wasn't about hunger. The awareness of being seen without being taken. "You know," she said, looking at the floor rather than at him, "most people would have crossed it by now." "Yes," he replied. "They would have done it to prove something." "Yes." "To me," she added. "And to themselves," he said. She laughed softly, the sound dry. "And you don't need to prove anything." "No," he said. "I need to understand." She looked up at him then, really looked, not searching for weakness, not scanning for permission, just looking. He met her gaze evenly, without challenge, without invitation. "What?" she said. "Are you trying to understand?" "How long you'll wait," he replied. "Once you realize I'm not going to save you from the choice." Her throat tightened. Save her. She hadn't known she was waiting for that. She shifted in the chair, crossing her legs without thinking, then uncrossing them again. The movement felt too deliberate now, too close to the old choreography. She stilled herself, letting her hands rest loosely on her thighs. "I'm not afraid of choices," she said. "I know," he replied. "You're afraid of being seen making one." The dark humor of it cut deep enough to hurt. She leaned back, letting the chair creak beneath her weight, grounding her. The sound felt honest. She liked that. "You think you figured me out," she said. "No," he replied. "I think you're figuring yourself out." Silence returned, not heavy, not empty, full. She could feel it move between them, a shared space neither of them rushed to occupy. Minutes passed. She felt her pulse settle into something steady. The earlier tension softened, not fading, but refining itself. Less edge, more clarity. The seductive pull was still there, but it had changed direction. She stood again, slower this time, without the confidence she'd worn earlier. Not hesitant, intentional. She closed some of the distance, stopping where she could feel his presence without challenging it. "You could end this," she said. "Yes." "You could leave." "Yes." "And you're still here." "Yes." She nodded, absorbing the rhythm of it, the certainty, the absence of need. "Why?" she asked, and this time the word came without performance. "Are you staying?" He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter, not softer. "Because," he said, "you stopped trying to control the moment." The words landed gently, but they stayed. She looked down at her hands, noticing the way her fingers had relaxed without instruction, the way her shoulders no longer angled inward or outward, no longer negotiating space. "I didn't plan for this," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's uncomfortable?" "Yes." She smiled, genuine now, the edge gone. "I usually plan everything." "I noticed." She took a step back, then another, creating space on purpose this time. The room breathed with her, expanding rather than resisting. She sat on the bed, not at the edge, but farther in, claiming it without ceremony. He remained standing. The line between them still existed, clear, unbroken, but it no longer felt like a dare. It felt like a boundary that had been named and respected long enough to become something else. She lay back briefly, then sat up again, propping herself on her elbows, eyes on the ceiling. "This is the part," she said, "where I usually feel bored." "And you don't," he replied. "No," she admitted. "I feel exposed." He nodded once. "That's the difference." The tension shifted again. Darker, but cleaner. Not sharp, intentional. She felt it settle into her, not demanding action, not pushing for release. She sat up fully and swung her legs off the bed, standing to face him again. The movement was simple, unadorned. "I don't know what happens next," she said. He met her eyes, steady. "Neither do I," he replied. "And that's the first honest thing that's happened tonight." She laughed quietly, a sound of recognition rather than amusement. The waiting had changed them both. It was no longer a standoff, no longer a game of who would flinch first. It had become something rarer, a shared pause where desire was acknowledged but not consumed. She took one more step back, not retreating, just recentering. "I used to think," she said slowly, "that the power was in being irresistible." "And now," he said, "and now I think it's in knowing when not to take," she finished. He smiled faintly. The room settled around them, holding the moment without asking it to resolve. The city outside continued its noise, distant and irrelevant. She realized then that the line had not been drawn to be crossed. It had been drawn to be noticed. And now that it had been, the waiting no longer felt loud. It felt deliberate. And whatever came next would be chosen, not assumed. The silence held, exactly where it belonged. The room did not rush them toward a conclusion. It held them the way water holds a breath, patient and exact. The line still lay between them, invisible but solid, not daring either of them to move. It had stopped being a test and become a surface, something you could stand on without slipping. She shifted first, not to provoke, not to perform, but to settle. Her feet planted, her spine straightened. The old choreography stayed where she had left it, folded and unused. "I thought waiting would make you weak," she said quietly. He nodded once. "It usually does." "And it didn't," she added. "No," he said. "It made us precise." The word felt right. Precision carried weight without noise. She took a breath and felt it land in her body. Not shallow, not rehearsed. The air tasted different now, like the moment after a storm when everything smells honest. She moved toward the chair and pulled it closer to the bed, not offering it to him, not taking it for herself. She sat on the edge of the mattress again, this time without calculation. The bed accepted her the way it always had, without commentary. "You could sit," she said, not inviting, not commanding. He did. The distance narrowed, but not the line. Their knees aligned without touching. The nearness carried heat without friction. She noticed the steadiness of his breath, the way it stayed unforced, even here. "This is where people usually get careless," she said. "Yes," he replied. "They confuse closeness with permission." She smiled, faint and knowing. "I taught myself that." "I know," he said. The acknowledgement landed gently. No accusation, no triumph. Just truth placed on the table and left there. She felt a flicker of humor rise and let it show. "So what do we do with it?" she asked. He leaned back slightly, giving the moment room. "We don't spend it." The answer surprised her into stillness. She felt it settle. The idea of not cashing intention for action, not exchanging awareness for release. The edge remained sharp, but it no longer cut. She watched the lamp glow, the way its low light traced the shape of his hands resting open on his knees. Nothing clenched. Nothing reached. "This feels dangerous," she said. "Yes," he replied, "because it leaves you intact." That was the truth she had been circling all night. Intact was unfamiliar territory. Intact meant no alibis, no stories to tell later about why something had happened the way it did. She stood and walked to the window, pressing her palm to the glass. The city shimmered back at her, indifferent and alive. She could feel him behind her without looking, a presence that did not claim her back. "I used to think the line existed to be crossed," she said. "Like proof." "Proof of what?" he asked. "That the moment mattered," she said, "that I mattered." He did not rush to answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet of a decision already made. "The moment matters when you choose it," he said. "You matter when you don't disappear inside it." She turned. The words found her, steady and sure. She crossed the room and stopped where she had stopped before, close enough to feel the warmth, far enough to keep the shape of herself. "Then say it," she said. "Say that you want me." He met her eyes. No flinch, no flourish. "I want you," he said, "and I want you choosing." The line hummed, not louder, clearer. She laughed once, soft and low, the sound of a lock turning. "That's unfair." He smiled faintly. "It's honest." She nodded, accepting the unfairness of honesty. It had always been that way. She stepped back and sat again, this time fully, feet on the floor, hands relaxed. "Stay," she said, and it was neither a test nor a trap. He stayed. Time loosened its grip. Minutes passed without being counted. The tension did not decay. It matured. It became something with a spine. She spoke then about small things. A place she liked to walk when she couldn't sleep. a song she never finished listening to because the ending felt too certain. He listened without interrupting, without steering the meaning. When he spoke, he kept it spare. A line about patience learned the hard way, a habit of stopping before the point of no return, no confession, no performance. The line remained. Eventually, she leaned back against the headboard, eyes half-lidded, breathing even. He stood again, not because he was done, but because standing felt right. She watched him, the way his shadow cut clean shapes across the wall. "If you leave," she said, "this will stay unfinished." "Yes," he replied, "and that doesn't bother you." "It does," he said. "It just doesn't own me." The dark humor returned, warm and sharp. She smiled, unafraid of it now. "Good," she said. "It shouldn't own either of us." He moved toward the door, not hurried, not hesitant. At the threshold he paused, not to look back for permission, to acknowledge the moment without taking it. "I'll see you," he said. "Yes," she replied. The door closed with the same soft certainty it had earlier. The room exhaled, not empty, not diminished, charged, contained. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, the line still bright in her mind. It had not been crossed. It had been honored. That was the choice. And as sleep gathered around her, she knew the edge would be there tomorrow, waiting without noise, ready for whatever she decided next. Morning arrived without drama. Light slipped through the curtains like it belonged there, touching the edges of the room without asking permission. The city hummed softly outside, less urgent than the night before, as if it understood that something had already been decided. She woke calm. That was new. No tight chest, no replaying moments to see where control had slipped or been taken. Just the quiet certainty of someone who had not been rushed into becoming smaller. She sat up slowly, feet touching the floor, grounding herself in the simple fact of being here. The line was still there in her mind, clear and intact, but it no longer felt sharp. It felt familiar, like a boundary you trust not to disappear when you look away. She dressed without thinking about how it would be perceived. Outside, the street was alive in its ordinary way. People going nowhere important, people going somewhere necessary. She stepped into it easily, her body moving with the confidence of someone who did not feel late to her own life. At the cafe downstairs, the barista smiled and handed her a cup without ceremony. She nodded back, not grateful, not distant, balanced. She took a seat by the window and let the warmth of the cup settle into her hands. The memory of the night returned, not as ache or regret, but as something finished properly, the kind of ending that doesn't need explanation. Her phone buzzed. One message, "Good morning." She smiled before she could stop herself. "Good morning," she typed back. There was a pause, not heavy, thoughtful. "I didn't cross it," the next message read. She leaned back in her chair, watching sunlight catch on passing cars. "I know," she replied. Another pause. "And you're still smiling." She took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground her. "Because you didn't take the moment from me," she typed. "You left it where I could choose it." This time the pause was longer. When the reply came, it was simple. "Then I did it right." She finished her coffee and stood, leaving a few coins on the table without overthinking the gesture. Outside, the day felt generous, not because it offered more, but because it demanded less. They met later, not in a room designed for tension, but in a place that didn't care what they did with it. A quiet park, benches worn smooth by time, trees that had seen everything and judged nothing. He was already there, sitting with his hands folded loosely, posture open. He stood when he saw her, then stopped himself halfway and laughed softly at the instinct. She noticed. She liked that. They walked side by side without rushing, the space between them easy now. No measuring, no daring, just presence. I thought it would feel unfinished, she said. And, he replied. And it feels complete, she said, because nothing was taken. He nodded. Completion doesn't always mean contact. She stopped walking and turned to him, studying his face in daylight. The steadiness was still there, but so was something warmer now. Not hunger, permission. I'm going to cross it, she said. He didn't move. Now, she added. Not because I waited, not because you refused, because I choose to. He smiled, slow and genuine. Then come here, he said. She did. The line dissolved not with urgency, not with force, but with intention. The closeness felt different now, clean, earned. The tension didn't vanish. It settled into something softer, something that didn't need to prove itself. They stood there, touching lightly, like people who understood the weight of timing. The city moved around them, indifferent and generous. Later, they sat on the grass, shoulders touching, talking about small things that suddenly felt large. Where they liked to walk, what they avoided, the habits they were trying to unlearn. Nothing felt owed. That was the happiness in it. As the sun lowered, she leaned back on her hands and looked at him with an expression that held no challenge. Thank you, she said. He paused, then nodded. Yes, he said. Now it means something. They laughed, the dark humor finally softening into ease. When they parted, it wasn't with promises. It was with understanding, with the knowledge that lines could exist without walls, that restraint could lead somewhere instead of stopping you short. She walked home feeling light in a way that didn't scare her. That night, she slept deeply, the kind of sleep that comes when nothing is unfinished and nothing is being chased. She had waited for him to cross the line. He hadn't, and because of that, when she finally did, it felt like the happiest choice she had ever made.